You're listening to the PensNation Radio Show on thepensnation.com. Follow us on Twitter at thepensnation.
It's the PensNation Radio Show on thepensnation.com. I'm Nick, joined tonight by my partner in crime, Andy Hughes. You can follow us on Twitter at thepensnation. You can follow us individually at pensnation_Nick. And for Andy, it's pensnation_Andy. We're creative like that. We're joined tonight by our very special guest, Brian Metzer, from numerous outlets, NHL.com, NHL Network Radio, the Beaver County Times, Penguins Radio 24/7, and deep breath, from thepoint.com. Brian, thanks for joining us tonight.
No problem at all, guys. It's been a while since I've been able to pop on the program with you, so I appreciate you having me on this evening.
Brian, I want to get to this right off of the bat. The Marc-Andre Fleury contract. He signed a new, kind of re-upped his contract here with the Penguins since we've done our last show, so we haven't really had a chance to talk about this yet. So it's still kind of fresh on our minds. It really kind of sent the fan base into quite the frenzy on social media, and it seemed as if, half of the fans really loved the deal, and the other half kind of wanted to jump out of their windows in dismay. They didn't know what to do with it. They were kind of up in arms. What was your take on this deal?
I had no problem whatsoever with the deal. I mean, Marc-Andre Fleury, to me, has done his job pretty admirably, and I know a lot of folks say that the playoff failures and this and that, and he can't get it done when it counts. Well, over the course of his career, he's been in the Stanley Cup playoffs 8 different times. I think he had 2 years that probably were bad that he would like to forget, and then there was also the year where he lost his job to Thomas Vokoun, obviously. But in the grand scheme of it, he's won the Stanley Cup. He's gotten to the Stanley Cup final a second time and didn't win it of those 2 trips. But he came away with 1 cup. That's more than a lot of these guys ahead of him can say.
It's more than me.
Ultimately, last year, I thought he was one of their better players in the Stanley Cup playoffs. This is a guy that got it done. He didn't get a whole lot of goal support in some of these seasons as well. I always look back to Game 7 against Tampa Bay Lightning where he loses 1-0. Dan Bosma makes a horrible decision of not putting Alex Kovalev on the ice with a 2-man advantage. And you have Mark Letestu playing in that situation. Mark loses 1-0 and ends up being the GOAT. So over the course of his career, I think his teams have not really supported him the way they needed to in the playoffs. Goaltending, like being a quarterback in the NFL, gets under a microscope. A lot of people are going to beat the goalie up. But I think this is a very fair deal for the Pittsburgh Penguins. I think it's a fair deal for Marc-Andre Fleury. He gets a modest increase, doesn't kill their cap moving into next season. And I think he deserved it. I think this is a guy that it's a 4-year deal. It's not too long. It's not too short. Gives him a little bit more evaluation time. And before it's all said and done, I think he's a much better goaltender today than he was over the past couple of seasons, just based on having Mike Bales here, having the sports psychologist work with him before the start of last season. And I think he has a swagger back. I think he's playing well, and his play this year really shows you where he is right now in terms of being a National Hockey League goaltender. I'm impressed with what I've seen. I have no issue with this contract, and I couldn't really get my head around the weeping and gnashing of teeth around the league. I was kind of annoyed by it, actually, because it's just people reading into a narrative that has been force-fed to them by the Canadian media, probably most of all, because they hate Mark up there based on his World Junior Championship performance back in, 06, I think it was, or 05, where he lets a goal in against Team USA, and I think they still beat him up for that. And he's not that kid anymore. I think he's a much better goaltender than he gets credit for, and this deal works pretty well in my book. So sorry for the long-winded answer, but that's all of my thoughts on Marc-Andre Fleury jammed into, probably 2 minutes.
No, yeah, that definitely sums up my thoughts too, I think. I really like the deal as well. As you said, I don't think it's too long. I don't think it's really too much money. And this is, Brian, you've been in the locker room a lot. I mean, just tell us about it. I mean, I think Marc-Andre Fleury is a really key part in that room, and I think a lot of people kind of underestimate that part of it because, a lot of these people are given alternative goalies if they would get rid of Fleury, and I'm not really sure if it would work that well because, you could just kind of tell when they asked Sidney Crosby about Fleury's deal, you could tell how happy he was for him. And, I mean, even last year we saw in that Columbus series when Fleury gave up that goal and gave the Blue Jackets the win, how the team kind of rallied around him because they knew what, everything he was going through on, with the fans and everything like that and freaking out on him. I mean, this is a team that rallies around this guy, and I think that's kind of an important aspect. And Jim Rutherford made that point during the press conference right after they signed the deal. He kind of talked about the importance of, how he is a pretty key figure in that locker room.
That's a great point. I mean, Marc-Andre is now the longest tenured Penguin, too, which I think people lose sight of. I mean, it seems like we just think of him as this young man, but he's been around since 2003, and now that Brooks Orpik and a couple other guys from the squad moved on, he's the graybeard here now. His teammates respect him. I think he is a glue guy in the locker room. They love Marc-Andre Fleury's gregarious nature, the fact that he's always smiling, and I know that he's not maybe as bubbly as he once was, because I think he's more focused and tuned in now, which is a little different because we're not used to that with Marc-Andre, but he still jokes around. I think he's a very fun interview. Some folks don't like the way he is in interviews because it's not always the best quote, or they think he still has his accent and you can't hear him the right way or whatever. People beat him up for a variety of reasons, but this is a guy that I don't think this team would be the same without him here. I mean, it's just he's a very big part in that room. His teammates really respect him. I think that they take his back whenever people do start to throw those salvos about him being a poor playoff performer and all that. You made a great point, too, about last year in the playoffs. He had that blip against Columbus. He let up the bad goals, and he came out to play the puck, and then he let up another stinker in overtime. So it was 2 in a row, but he got it right back on track in the next game, and I think that proves a big point about Marc-Andre right now. In years past, he may have melted down. He may have had another bad game in a row right after that because things were going off the rails a little bit. It would go a little sideways, to use a Scott Burnside-ism, because that's what he always said. If it goes sideways for Marc-Andre Fleury, what are they going to do? Well, they're clearly going to be happy with having him around and play better defense in front of him and play the game the right way, and he's going to be more successful because of it, and that's what you're seeing this year. But I think he is a very vital piece of the locker room. I think he's a vital piece of the franchise. Teammates love him. I think he's very instrumental in the locker room chemistry as well. So that was a good observation by you. Fun guy to have around, and I'm glad we're going to have him for at least 4 more years.
Now, part of the narrative with the whole Flower contract is that you can get a comparable, goaltender for a much cheaper price here, and that's kind of what rubs some of the anti-Fleury crowd the wrong way. Where would you rank, and I'm not really so sure that's true, where would you rank Marc-Andre Fleury right now as a starting goaltender in the NHL? He's not like quite Henrik Lundqvist, but he's not like, the bottom of the barrel guy.
No, he's not. I mean, he might not be a top 3 goaltender right now, but who knows? I mean, his numbers right now look like he could be if he could play this way.
But
now,
he's not making top 3 money.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing. We've seen him do this in the past where he has a nice stretch of play and then he dips a little bit. So we'll see if he has those dips this year. But ultimately, I think he's at least a top 10 in the league right now. I think he can go out, and people say you can't just look at the wins. Well, it's not easy to get 35 and 40 wins a year, and that's what Marc-Andre's been able to do. Yes, he has a good team in front of him that scores a lot of goals, but at the same time, he's still going to make the saves that he's got to make. There's a game just a couple nights ago against the Winnipeg Jets where he lets up 3, but he makes 3 huge saves at the end of the first period to keep that game 1-1. If he doesn't make those saves, he'll probably lose the game. It's a whole different scenario. So I think Mark slots right in the top 10 in goaltenders in the league, maybe even top 5 when he's playing his best. But there's always going to be those couple of players ahead of him. But you know what? He has that Stanley Cup. Some of these guys don't. I think when I hear people throwing out names like Braden Holtby and James Reimer, I think my buddy Sean Gentili said the other day, I'm like, come on, man. You watched James Reimer melt down for the Toronto Maple Leafs in the playoffs a couple years ago. I know their entire team did. That's the guy you want to pin your hopes on. He's won nothing so far. Marc-Andre Fleury's fine by me. I love having him in town, and I hope that he can maybe at some point here in the near future get that second Stanley Cup ring, and then he can do the Patrick Waugh move and plug his ears with the ring so he doesn't have to hear the criticisms, because I think he's fully capable of taking this team back to the so-called promised land.
We're here with Brian Metzer from NHL.com, Penguins Radio, and a slew of other outlets. You can follow him on Twitter at Brian_Metzer. Brian, the Pens are on quite the streak right now, aren't they? And what do you attribute that to right now?
Well, it's a little bit of everything, guys. I mean, they're getting good 5-on-5 play. That's something I think that a lot of people have said they haven't gotten good 5-on-5 play or enough production. They have, I didn't figure it out now after the past 2 games, I believe, but going into 2 games ago, they were scoring almost 60% of their goals at 5-on-5. Power play clicking like it is at close to 40%. Their penalty kills killed 37 in a row. If you go back to the Dallas game 3 of the season, they've actually killed 40 of 41 now, which is just otherworldly for both special teams to be doing what they're doing right now. And it's hard to, you almost have to nitpick to find what isn't going well for this team right now. And that's a testament to, I think, the new coaching staff. And also, this is the one thing. I don't want to, you want to praise Mike Johnson and his staff a little bit, but let's not underscore the value of just a little bit of change here, too, because we've seen that the team stagnates a little bit on certain coaching philosophies. They did it with Mike Therrien. Once Therrien moved on, they liked Dan Bylsma for a handful of years and were light the league up. I think they stagnated on Dan. Now they got the new look. It looks like the fun is back. They're out there having a ball. They're laughing and joking. They're running up offensively. They're having these great evenings on the ice. I mean, it's just unbelievable when you see the offense flowing the way it is. But it to me, everything is just working the way it's supposed to. They're all pulling in the same direction. They're getting good defense in front of their goaltender. They're not allowing a lot of second and third opportunities, and the special teams are working. And whenever all of that comes together, you have a recipe for a lot of success, and that's what you've seen over this 7-game winning streak ever since they blew that game in Detroit. They really just got all on the same page, did the work they needed to do, and righted a couple of wrongs, and it's just working like a charm right now.
Brian, now talking about the streak, the Penguins also have a streak with their penalty kill, which really started out terribly. They were allowing a lot of power play goals early on in the season, but now they've, I think it's 37 consecutive penalties they've killed off, and I think that ranks third in the NHL right now. It's been quite a climb. What has really caused that? Do you think it's kind of the personnel getting used to it, or is it maybe a systematic thing, or probably a little bit of both?
Yeah, I think it is a little bit of both there, Andy. I mean, when you look at the penalty kill, it started off those first 2 games where through the first 3 games they let up 6 power play goals against, and ever since, nothing. So that's just been spectacular turning it around the way they did. It went from 3 goals to 2 goals to 1 goal to now just shutting it down for 37, as you just mentioned. So I think that it really, first of all, they're utilizing a lot of players that have a lot of years' experience in killing penalties. I mean, Rob Scuderi's been out there doing a pretty nice job for them. Paul Martin's been involved in it. Oli Mata was doing great work when he was playing out there. A couple games actually led them in time on ice, shorthanded, which for a young 20-year-old guy, that was just something you don't normally see. But then you have the Craig Adams of the world, and you have Pascal Dupuis out there doing it. These are all players that have really thrived in a penalty-killing role in the past. So they had to learn maybe some of the new philosophies that Gary Agnew wanted them to utilize in killing penalties, and it took a few games to work out the kinks. But ultimately, they have tightened up the box area right around the net, because they were, in the first couple games, you saw a lot of passes coming right through there, and they were scoring some easy goals against. Corey Perry scored a couple that way in the Ducks game. Joffrey Lupul scored one against them in the Leafs game in the second game of the season that way, where they just let him go right to the net, let a pass come right through that front of the net area, and he just taps it in. They really tightened that up. They're not letting second and third opportunities happen very often, if at all. And on top of that, when they have opportunities to clear now, they're getting the puck out. Because when they're not successful in the penalty kill, you'll watch them try and chip it up the wall or do something, and the defending point man is able to just keep it in and get it back down deep and work a little give and go right in that front area. They're not allowing that right now. When they get opportunities to clear, it's happening. And it's just it's working beautifully right now. I feel like a goal is going to come soon, though, because over the past couple of games, there's been moments where their penalty kill has looked like they were running around and chasing a little too much. And when they get out of their quadrant, so to speak, because they have those 4 guys sort of doing a pretty good job of building their box around Marc-Andre Fleury or Thomas Greiss, whoever may be in the cage, they work pretty well. But when they start chasing and running around, they make themselves a little susceptible for that cross-ice pass and an easy goal against. And I'm afraid that might be coming. But as long as they're cognizant of it, I think they'll be able to do what they've been doing and just keep this amazing streak rolling. And probably as soon as tomorrow night could potentially be killing 40 in a row. And it's 40 of 41 right now if you count back to the Dallas game. So we'll see if they can keep it moving in that direction. It's going to probably work pretty well because the Rangers and Toronto have struggled a little bit, and each of those teams is who they're going to face in their next 3.
No, we haven't seen a whole lot of struggles yet. I mean, beginning of the year with the penalty kill and a couple of those late game collapses seem like blips kind of in the grand reality of all things right now. If you had to grade the staff and the system right now, could you actually do that, or do you think that you need a little larger sample size to kind of be able to give it a more accurate description of of a grade there.